Welcome, everybody, to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno, episode 20. Today's guest is linebacker of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, Micah Teitz. Micah, thanks so much for joining. It's been a long time coming for you to be on the show, but we're glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
So, Micah, obviously, we're dealing with the situation with COVID and the CFL with having not played the season this year. How have things looked like for you outside of the realm of playing football games and strapping up for the green and white?
Man, it was super disappointing when we finally got the confirmation that we weren't going to have a season because I think many of us thought we were going to have some sort of bubble situation that was actually going to happen in Winnipeg. But, that fell through kind of at the last minute. So, really it's just been kind of, taking a step back on the training and whatnot, getting to enjoy some other hobbies that you don't have time to. During football season, so that's been nice. And just kind of trying to figure out what life looks like when football is officially all said and done.
It must be definitely strange at the very least to be in such a, I want to use a phrase like Cron and I had this conversation talking about hamster wheel. When you're in football, when you're in that world, you're just so focused on football all the time and training and everything. And then when it stops, it's like just this ginormous pause. Do you feel like it's been a bit overwhelming for maybe some of the people that you've talked with, or even just when it first happened?
Yeah, man, it was definitely overwhelming for sure because we spent so much time, just getting ready for a season that no one could have ever predicted that was going to get canceled back in January, type of thing. So yeah, it is and it's kind of tough to, like, this is kind of one of the first times that there is nothing really to prepare for a while at least. So it was a little bit of a interesting transition to begin with, but then you got to start looking at some of the positives. Like, you get to spend more time with your friends and your family back home. And like I said, pick up on some hobbies, play some golf and, whatnot.
What hobbies have you cared to enjoy during the time that you've had off of football and being able to maybe participate in other sports where you're not worried about getting injured for games or anything? Or
Yeah, man. Well, like, honestly, the day that they officially canceled the season, I went and I bought a golf membership. So that's what I've been doing since then. I guess like a bit of a country club man now, I guess. But that's about it so far. And now it's kind of starting to snow in Calgary. I guess it's hunting season now too, so we'll get into a bit of that as well.
it sounds like from a lot of the people I've talked to and seen that golf has been one of the biggest things that people have taken up during the stretch of COVID, especially with football or hockey players as well, since you can't really
Yeah,
afford to get injured. Golf is a very safe sport physically to play and also just a lot of fun to compete in because it's so hard to be really good and consistent. So I think it kind of evens the playing field.
yeah, and it's something so different from football, just completely solo and completely mental, not as much physical. I'll get my butt beat, by anyone out of shape, anything like that, little kids and stuff like that. So it just goes to show how hard it is.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough sport. And I think that it's really fun to take up after, or in between football seasons or after people are done playing high level sports because A, it doesn't wear on your body physically. And B, it's something that you will never be so good at. You'll just be bored playing. And it'll always be a competitive atmosphere, I think, when you're playing with others.
Yeah, it'll be my sport when I'm retired and everything like that. I still got a ways to go, but I still enjoy it.
So, Michael, let's take it back a little bit here and dial it to the transition that you experienced between playing college football for the University of Calgary Dinos and then playing in the CFL for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. What was your mindset going into playing for Saskatchewan, or at least entering the CFL, knowing that it was going to be a different game, and especially considering the fact that the first step for a star university football player is usually not the same role that they fulfilled once they get to the pros?
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously when you first get drafted and everything like that, it's very exciting. And I was fortunate to get picked fairly high to where I could, kind of, I kind of went in with the mentality that I was, at least going to make the roster at the very least. But I also wanted to, be able to prove myself and, get to doing what I do best, which is playing linebacker right away. But then, of course, when you get there, you realize that there's already players in the Canadian position that you're going to play, and there's just quite a bit to learn. So, but I always enjoyed playing special teams at the University of Calgary. I always thought I really just thought it was something that made the Canadian football game special. So I always, enjoyed running down on kickoff. And I mean, it's the first play of every game. You can't beat it in the CFL, starting the game off in Regina every time we play.
And especially in an atmosphere like the Riders have at Mosaic Stadium, I can only imagine how electrifying it is to run down on kickoff, especially when you have the opening kickoff and your defense goes in the field first. It just must be such a thrilling feeling.
Oh yeah, and they got the countdown, the 13th man countdown, and all that stuff right before we get off. And it seems like the crowd noise is pretty much level from 30 seconds before kickoff all the way through the first drive that offense gets. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So talking about your University of Calgary career, you really made a name for yourself at linebacker towards the middle to end of your time playing for the Dinos. But what was it about your experience there that you found really made you feel that you were going to be a successful football player, or at least have a chance to play professional? Because obviously players can evolve for better or for worse during a university football career.
Yeah, so I was really lucky to just kind of in my first year I was able to play right away. I only started, I think, one game in my freshman year in college. The rest of it I was just playing on special teams. But just being able to play, as a young kid, like right out of high school, it gives you confidence for your career going forward. And just being a part of the University of Calgary, you look at players' careers before you and kind of how when they got their careers on path, and most of them, if not everyone, especially on the defensive side of the ball, you're pretty much backing up a eventual draft pick. You know what I mean? Like my first year, my backup was Adam Konar. He's with the BC Lions, was with the Edmonton Eskimos. So I had that right away, and I saw the way he did everything like that, and I just kind of wanted to emulate those guys. And and then my second year I became a starter, and found quite a bit of success that year. So I kind of realized that this was something that I could do, and it was definitely my career path of choice coming out of university. So
and playing professional football is definitely a tough venture at that, considering the fact that very, very, very few players get selected into the CFL draft, and B, also stick to the active roster after the year they get drafted, and then to stay on for at least 2 or 3 years, which is what they consider the average career in the CFL. So how did you gather and absorb all that information, or at least the scope of that reality as you were living in that moment? Was it tough, or did you find that you were able to block out the noise as to what the expectations were?
Yeah, man, it was really tough, honestly, the beginning, because my very first training camp with the Riders, I was like injured at the beginning of training camp, so I really didn't do much of training camp. So you don't even know if you're going to be on the team, because most of the draft picks end up getting sent back to university as it is. But I ended up just doing enough to like impress them enough in that sense for them to keep me on board there. And then, yeah, it's all about carving on a niche for yourself in the CFL, like doing what you do and doing it well. So whether that's, covering kicks or, just blocking someone, they need people to do it. And it's really just, kind of building on each game, getting more comfortable. And then once you carve out that position for yourself amongst the team, you find that it is actually a very valuable position, seeing as the rosters, there's not an unlimited roster size. So, if someone that plays all 4 special teams and a little bit of linebacker or a little bit of another position goes down, that's quite a hit to a team. So you realize that you are quite important, and it's definitely a you're a needed member of the team, even though, you're not getting all the hype around it.
So especially with going to a team like Saskatchewan high in the draft, and look back at the combine and you performed exceptionally well at that event. Did you find that going into the combine, you knew that this was going to be a big opportunity to really raise draft stock, or how do you assess the value of players before and after the draft in terms of where guys can land in the CFL?
Yeah, so I mean, the majority of it will be based on your game film. I mean, you either got it or you don't. I know that's the same with the NFL and the CFL, just regardless. But then then the combine kind of helps them figure out who can actually, play at the next level with the different size and the speed out there. So, it's just something, it just confirms their already suspicions about you type of thing. But just, you know, I may, in college, I find that some of the, like when it comes to all Canadians or President's trophies like that, I find that it's not truly the best players that win those awards, like the best overall players. It's kind of the guys that, have the most stats, especially in the OUA, they make, 50 more tackles than the guys in the Canada West type of thing when it comes to that. So what they like to see in the combine is just, especially for linebackers, bigger, faster guys that can move well, basically. Because when you go to the CFL, you realize that just that's what it takes to play on special teams and whatnot. Also, just playing in, just having the advantage of playing in the Canada West, which is way more professional football than the other way more professional style football than the other conferences. That'll also get you ready. But yeah, definitely the combine was huge for me. I knew that was kind of right up my alley. I've always loved training and that stuff. So it was a good way for me to kind of secure myself as a good linebacker in the draft.
And from the talks of, what the scope of that event means, and even from, like you said, you got it, you don't. It's such an interesting dynamic to look at award winners and the stats. And you mentioned the competitiveness of the Canada West, especially when you're in the thick of it. I find that it can be maybe discouraging for some players having thoughts in the back of their mind or worries in that, hey, maybe they may look at a guy from Ontario and say, oh, he's way better because his stats are boosted when they play teams that are significantly weaker. But I think from what you can see in the draft and as time goes on, like they say, the cream rises to the top. And so I think that the Canada West definitely does do a great job preparing guys for professional football. And especially for yourself, being mobile at linebacker is so huge. And I've seen it from watching the CFL for many years and even the NFL. It's one thing to be a big, burly, strong guy,
Yeah.
but then it's another to be fast and to be able to be athletic, right? So like, how did you feel that you matched up compared to the rest of your position group once you got to Riders training camp?
Yeah, so when I got to Riders training camp, it was honestly a bit of a surprise. I honestly was pretty much the one of the biggest linebackers there, which is a bit it honestly kind of shocks you when you go pro and then you see that you're already quite physically at the level that everyone else is, even being so much younger type of thing. But right away I noticed that there were a few, one or two players that are very, very exceptional, like very, like they stand out quite a bit. But then the rest of the group, we very similar. Um, you know, the veterans, they have the leg up. They know the playbooks, and they're just more comfortable in a CFL setting. But when you just watch us do drills and do individual linebacker stuff, the majority of us look almost identical on game film. So yeah, other than a few of the just exceptional ones, pretty much I'd say comparable.
And that's definitely a good thing, I can imagine, to feel, or at least to know once you get there, is, hey, I'm actually as big as these, or I'm as big, or if not bigger than most of these guys, because from the people I've talked to, who got there, sometimes you look and see the guys, even the transition from high school to university or university to pro, you just see these guys that are just dinosaur players. They're just huge, or they're super fast, or guys, especially from the US, because you're not really playing against Americans when you're playing CIS. And then once you get to the CFL, you're up against guys that were, on the bubble of being on an NFL roster, which is
for sure, yeah,
a major shell shock for sure to some players. But that's great to hear that going into a training camp with a team that especially is poised to make a Grey Cup run like the Riders, you already felt really prepared to be able to succeed at that position. So then as training camp went on, when was it that you knew that you were finding a groove to be a member of the active roster? Because for those that may not know who are listening out there, it's really hard to get drafted in your draft eligible year and then stay and not go back to school, because almost all of them do.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, honestly, like I just briefly mentioned before, it was a bit of a whirlwind, especially my first one. Well, honestly, both my training camps have been a bit of disasters going forward right now. But I had, I'd say, a good week in my first year, my very first training camp, where I was doing very well, and then I ended up having a bit of a hip injury that put me out for the rest of the training camp. So I was able to play in one preseason game only type of thing. So I showed enough there, and in the brief time that I was in training camp, that I was going to be, a reliable member of the team. The one thing that happens though when you get injured in training camp is you spend all your time in rehab, whereas in like college you'll be watching, all that stuff with the group at all times. It almost seems like you're separate, while they're practicing, you're doing, rehab. And then when they're watching game film, you're doing like other physio and whatnot. So you get a little bit behind on the actual, defensive scheme, just what's really going in. But when it comes down to, just playing special teams and whatnot, you don't really miss too much. You can be plugged in and play if you got it pretty easily. So, I mean, yeah, that was my first year, and it was definitely a relief to make the team for sure, but super exciting as well. And being the youngest guy on the team is always kind of cool. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, making it through training camp is no easy task for any player, even for those who are veterans, because that basically is what your job becomes year in, year out. Train to survive training camp. And then when you get to the games, it should be easier than the meat grinder you go through.
Well, yeah, especially because I mean, CFL, NFL, both once you're in season practicing, it's very light. No pads really, just more technique work and scheming and whatnot. So it's very rare to see someone go down in a practice during the season. But so you just got to make it through the 3 weeks at the beginning when the pads are flying and everyone's going 100%. So,
what was your first welcome to the league moment with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, whether it be in a game or training camp?
I got Jameer Thurman. He's playing for the oh my gosh, I think he plays for the no, his name was Vaughters. Last name was Vaughters, and he's in the NFL right now currently. I saw him. He got a sack against Tom Brady 2 weeks ago. I forget who they were playing.
The Chargers?
Anyway, yeah, maybe he was the Chargers. I'm not sure, but anyways, I counted him out on kickoff, and he just so happened to be the fourth man that I had to block, and I thought I'd sneak up and give him a good pop, and you end up on your back every once in a while. So that's what happened. That's okay though. Yeah. Got to.
What was that like a big shell shock? Because hey, you ever really experienced that before, or was it a long time since you'd experienced, getting leveled?
Yeah, you really don't used to getting leveled ever playing linebacker and then being in college and whatever. It's not something that you think of. But honestly, you could ask anyone, your best players, your veterans, if you're being aggressive and you're trying to go for making key plays and whatnot, there's at least some point that somebody's going to tag you really good at one point. So You just gotta tighten up the chin strap a bit more, and not a big deal. Yeah.
So then in a counter to that, what was your very first, giving somebody their welcome to the league moment, or, I'm in the league now, where you were able to be the hammer, not the nail?
Yeah, so in my very first year, I started off and we played the Toronto Argonauts, and I didn't have that was my very first game. I wasn't too comfortable in there, like I just wasn't. I wouldn't say I was in the I since I missed so much training camp, I wasn't in the greatest game shape, and I just I wasn't too confident in the very first game, and it kind of showed. I was a bit tentative and whatnot. But then 1 week later, we played the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and I got 3 special teams tackles that game, and I kind of just when you go home after, and then you you just look at the game stats, seeing your name up on there, kind of middle of the pack in tackles, just by playing special teams, it makes you feel like you can, get after it and get going. So,
And especially, I know in special teams that's where you can really find a way to build a craft and niche for yourself, like you mentioned, because it's very rare for guys to start out on, getting defensive reps right away from the U Sports draft. And even if you're drafted in the first round or even in the top 5, like I'm sure you even remember guys that you were on University of Calgary with, who went to the league a year before you or same year and were still grinding on special teams when they first made the CFL. So I can only imagine how awesome of a feeling that was to see yourself, hey, like, look at me, like I'm actually in the middle of the pack there.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. It feels good.
So now that you've kind of been able to get your feet underneath you, what is your favorite thing about being a member specifically of the Saskatchewan Roughriders in terms of football? Is it the camaraderie, or is it, is there a certain, obviously the rivalry with the Bombers? Like, is that one of the best things about being in Saskatchewan, or what do you enjoy most about the team in the province itself?
Man, I know like anyone from Regina will immediately like say the fans, and they're obviously incredible, especially coming from university sports where you average maybe 1,000 people to the game to like 30 plus. It's pretty cool to see. I would say the best part about playing in Regina and being a part of the Riders, though, compared to the other teams in the CFL, is the facilities that we got at Mosaic compared to like just in any of the older stadiums as well. I know Investors, the IG Field was fairly new and fairly updated, but like just compared to even looking at the old McMahon Stadium and whatnot, just hearing about what they have, and then some of the great, just the amazing weight room that we have, all the meeting rooms, just it's really cool. It truly feels like big league pro sports when you walk into the Riders facility. Honestly, you feel like some of the other stadiums, like when you walk in for away games, you kind of feel like, okay, like this is the CFL, it's a little bit lower budget. But when you walk into Mosaic Stadium with your key card and you go into the elevator and down into the main rooms, like it's pretty exceptional. Definitely comparable to the NFL stadiums.
And I've only seen a few previews of inside the Riders locker room or inside some of the facilities when they came out not too long ago. And people were, they're jabbing at Winnipeg saying, hey, like you guys have the newest stadium in the CFL. Well, not anymore. We got nice facilities, but I got to give it to the Riders. Like, you guys got some unbelievably nice facilities. The field is great. I played there when I was on the Winnipeg Rifles, and it was awesome. I actually really enjoyed being in the stadium, and it's just a great atmosphere.
Yeah, they should have just put a dome over it. And that's the only thing. They could have put a roof on that thing.
Yeah, I honestly think the Lions now are the only team left with a dome, and if there's a dome in the CFL, like a dome, more domes than with CFL teams, like we could be playing games into January, February. Like, you could have just extended the season into next year, and
100%.
I think it also presents like just, I don't know, sometimes a more interesting dynamic with games, right? Like, for example, in university, they used to have the Vanier Cup forever and ever and ever for almost 30 years straight between like 1980 and 2000, like 12 or whatever. Every game was indoors for the Vanier Cup. And then they went away from that and they started playing outdoors. And obviously, I'm sure for the big, burly, tough guys at linebacker like yourself, that it's, fun, and you go in sleeveless in the cold. But I think when there's an advantage or disadvantage for a team in a final game that affects the outcome, like it can kind of suck when you really think about like, what would this look like as a shootout, or what would it look like when it's just an even playing field, like a literal bubble,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you say that, but then you kind of want a bit of the weather, though. This is Canadian football. Like, it's kind of cool going out for practice when it's -10 in November and everyone's not wanting to go outside in double sweatpants and all that stuff. And then who the Canadian kids are when we run out there, and it's not that big of an issue. So.
Were there some funny moments of culture shock that you witnessed as a Riders player from guys who had come up from the US?
Yeah, man, it's definitely Americans are I love the Americans on our team, and all that stuff. They're just it's a little bit of they're different people down there. They're awesome groups of guys, and it's nice to get to know them and experience their culture and whatnot. And the thing for me though that got me, especially when I got there, especially because Coach Jones was the coach when I first got there, and he most of the other coaches were from the South, like in Tennessee, Alabama, and whatnot. So there's some very, very, very thick accents that I've never really heard before. So I had a bit of a tough time like picking up on what some guys were saying, but eventually you get a bit of a twang yourself by the time you come home to Calgary.
So obviously there is an interesting dynamic within the CFL, that there is a certain percentage of Canadian players and the Americans, and I think that it does create a great dynamic within the locker room as well. So can you speak to how that's translated in terms of some of the friendships or close bonds that you've made with guys who maybe came from a very different path than yourself?
Yeah, it's like super interesting just like to even think about it. Like in my very first year, I lived with Denzel Radford, and then another guy, his name was Brandon Bartlett, the guy that I was telling you before that we exchanged jerseys. But, it's cool that he came from Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm from Calgary, Alberta, and we ended up meeting for the first time in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan for training camp. And then, he's my roommate for the year. And, I consider him one of my best friends. I just think it's really cool how just you can, just be like bonded over what we're doing for work. And, just the fact that we play football together, you just become that much closer.
In terms of the way in which a day in the life of a CFL player goes, take us a bit through what it looks like when you're a professional in comparison to when you were in university, because obviously there's no more school, or I mean, that's mandatory anyways. So what does the average day in the life of a CFL player look like?
Well, basically, depending on at the beginning of the year, your team agrees upon practice time, and there's a maximum of a 4.5 hour rule that the CFLPA put in place. So that includes the official meetings and your practice time and whatnot. So we agreed to practice in the morning for our 4.5 hours. So what it looks like is, I'll get to the facility at about a bit before 8 in the morning, and then we'll have I'll get ready, get into our little sweatsuits or whatever, basically, and then we have breakfast at the stadium. Had till about 8:30, and then from 8:30 to 9, they we have voluntary meetings. I like to say voluntary because, like, I mean, they're voluntary, but you should be at them, or else you might not be playing this week, type of thing. So yeah, we go to those, and then right after that, we go into like a special teams meeting, which is with pretty much the whole team except for the offensive linemen, obviously, and the quarterbacks. And then right after that, it's defense for an hour. So 1 hour, 1 hour special teams, 1 hour defense, and then on the field for whether it's depends on first day, it might be only an hour. Second day, it might be an hour and a half, type of thing. If we really got to work on stuff, we might be pushing the time a little bit. But other than that, and then when we're off the field, it's get in the cold tub, get in the hot tub if you want. And we got lunch served at the stadium, and then usually you'll have a bit of work with either your position coach or just some of your teammates in your position. You'll get together, watch some more game film, and yeah, that takes you to usually about, I don't know, 3 o'clock, 3:30, and then head home, and then the guys get on Call of Duty or whatever, or we play some board games out in Regina and whatnot too. So lots of the guys go bowling as well in the evening. So really, whatever you like, honestly.
Are you a big bowler yourself?
Man, I never got into it, honestly. I wasn't very good at it, but I think I got to. I know some of my teammates, like, they go and buy their own bowling balls and all that stuff too. So yeah, they get pretty into it. So maybe I'll have to check it out.
And Regina is a very friendly city. I really love being in Regina, but do you
Yeah.
find that, some of the players are a bit shocked as to the lack of things or entertainment that there is to enjoy when you're in Saskatchewan? Or do you think that the camaraderie just overrides the
Yeah,
size and scope of the city?
people are definitely shocked, especially people coming from big American cities. Like, that's huge. Like, I always knew what Regina was like. I always knew it was more low key and whatnot. And yeah, I'm just kind of a more low key guy as it is. I'm not the biggest, into the big, bars and the clubs and whatnot that, some place like Toronto or the big American cities offer and whatnot. So, it's, definitely not, it definitely doesn't have as much like amenities as a place like Calgary or a bigger city in Canada. But, I personally enjoy my time in Regina. I think it's what you make of it, really. Like, I think there's great places everywhere. But yeah, it's definitely a shock for lots of people. The biggest thing is when you go to like a bar in Calgary versus the bar in Saskatchewan, just in the size and like whatnot of it. Other than that, it's pretty similar.
So do you find that there's a bit more of a homey feeling in Saskatchewan? Like, people recognize players in the team, or, you're going out, you wear a Rider gear, like, they asking for autographs and stuff. Like, is that more of a fan engaged experience? Or do you think that if you want to be low key, then, you can go under the radar pretty easily?
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, for sure you can go low key and whatnot, but honestly, you're pretty recognizable in Regina. Not myself personally. I pretty much look like someone who is from Regina. But, if you're, yeah, but some people will, you'll get pointed. You'll definitely get pointed out, and more good things than bad things. Like, than bad anything. Like, just me and my some of the teammates in the drive-through at Burger King or whatever, and then someone sees us and wants to pay for our meal or whatever. Just little stuff like that. Yeah, and it's good to interact with the fans there. They care so much about it, and anyone who cares that much about football, like, I like that type of person. So it's a good thing.
So in terms of now how you bring the identity of the Riders out to other places in the CFL, do you have a favorite place personally to play yet in the CFL, or as a favorite team, or what is your dynamic or outlook on the way that Saskatchewan brings their brand of football across the league?
Yeah, well, Saskatchewan's football is definitely, it's a pretty, especially on the defensive side, it's pretty aggressive. You're going to get blitzed a lot when you play us, and just an aggressive style. I can't speak for the offense in any way. I'm not really too sure what goes on over there, but I know Cody Fajardo will be the perfect man for a shootout. So if we need it to happen like that, but yeah, like, sorry, what were you?
So what is, Saskatchewan has a unique identity and brand of football that carries out to the rest of the league. So how do you like look at that, and do you have like a favorite place to play in the CFL, or on the road, that is, or a favorite rivalry? Like, obviously the Bombers are big, but do you have another team, or or do you like playing against Winnipeg the most? Like, how do you view that?
No, everyone on the Riders likes playing Winnipeg the most. The Labor Day and the Banjo Bowl is it's different than anything in the CFL. Like, I was a big Labor Day Calgary versus Edmonton just growing up as a kid. It's seriously non-comparable. And then you always get to play them another time after that too. So usually just as history goes, usually the games are split. Well, at least since I've been there, they've been split. Winnipeg and Labor Day and Banjo Bowl goes 1-1. So it definitely leaves another like an interesting game come late November when we shoot out for the third time for the season series. But yeah, I love to play at McMahon Stadium. Still, I got my first start for the Riders there this year, and I still like it's just so familiar to you. It's I don't know what it is. It's just cool to see, and it's definitely different when there's thousands of fans that are not just like a couple moms and girlfriends at the Dinos games and whatnot.
Yeah, and obviously the familiarity with McMahon combined with the rivalry, the storied rivalry between the Bombers and the Riders are two big points of I guess why people love being a part of that franchise, because obviously for the Canadian kids, they all have their university ties or their home ties, and then they have their already existing CFL rivalry ties. So for I guess the guys who play for Hamilton from the Dinos, like them playing against the Argos is a big thing, and then playing at McMahon is also a big thing, I'm sure.
Of course, yeah, everyone loves homecoming and whatnot. Having my family too in Calgary, and everyone here, it's just it's always the best game of the year.
So in terms of the way that how things have gone so far, Saskatchewan, like what has been your favorite thing about your tenure so far, and what has been the thing with your tenure that you found the most challenging, whether it be personally or whether it be like as a team? Because obviously that's it can be very, very difficult, but it can also be very enjoyable depending on the experience that you have as an individual or with what you guys have been able to accomplish together.
Yeah, well, my most enjoyable memory so far in the CFL was getting the start in Calgary. One, because it was in Calgary, but the more important one was, I mean, Solomon Alamanian is on my team currently, and man, as someone who's been a fan of the CFL since while I was in high school and even before that, getting to play like starting next to someone like that is like, that's pretty cool. Like, especially when I was a kid, I didn't even know about the NFL or anything like that. I knew about the CFL. That was my sport. That was what I liked to watch and everything like that. So, and then, when you get, more into it and then seeing how good of a player Solomon was, while we were in high school and even while we were in university, like still to this day, I mean, that's just so cool. And I'll always remember that. Because I'm not too sure how much longer, he's getting to be a veteran, so I'm not too sure how many more opportunities I'll have with that. So to say I had that at home and with him is pretty cool for sure. And the most challenging part is definitely just dealing with these injuries that I've had. In university, I never, I think I missed one game in my college career, honestly, and then. In my very first year, I missed like a bunch of training camp, and then one game, and then I was put on the sixth game with a concussion. And then in my second year, I played 16 games, but I missed literally all of training camp and the first two games with like an ankle injury. So it's just frustrating when that stuff happens, and you get kind of almost forgotten about for whatever reason, which is fair though. I mean, the coaches have to, continually progress the team and whatnot, regardless of if you're playing or not. So, it's fair to get put down to the bottom again, but it's kind of tough again then, coming back out of it, trying to find your spot again where you belong on the team, because if you come up, somebody else has to go down type of thing. So it's just the way it is.
That's fair. And I can know, and obviously, professional sports is a cutthroat business and very ruthless at that too. Coaches have to make decisions that are based on business and that aren't personal. And especially when, each person on the team has an individual story and a background that has led them to down that path on that team. It can all disappear, just before your very eyes, and it can come as fast or it can go away as fast as it came to you. And obviously, that can definitely be a challenging thing to deal with, because if you look at the scope of all the people in university that didn't get the opportunity to play pro football, you can only imagine how challenging coming to that reality may be when you see the light at the end of the tunnel, or if you're playing pro. I had a conversation with a gentleman who was on an episode of the show previously, who played for the Bombers, Brett McNeil, and he was saying to me that the toughest thing about being a football player for a long time, especially like he was for 12 years, is that most of the time your career doesn't end by your own choice. It's usually
Of
an
course,
injury
yeah.
or being cut or whatever it is, and then guys retire. Very few people get to ride off in the sunset like Peyton Manning with a Super Bowl raised like this in their hand, So
Of
I can only
course, yeah.
imagine. I can only imagine how tough that is to deal with as a player, especially when you're young in your career and still trying to find your footing.
Yeah, it's that's probably the toughest thing on every player. It's just the one thing that holds everyone back, and it's just ruthless at times. People just get into just bad injury snaps, and it's just the way it goes. So you gotta try to prepare for not to have that happen.
So in terms of the way that things have been going with football, and now that you've had a big pause with playing games because of COVID, have you given thought or reflected on what you may want, your career to look like after you're done playing football? Or is that something that guys try not to think about when you're in the midst of, being a professional athlete?
Yeah, like it's definitely something that you don't always enjoy thinking about, because really this is it's an amazing job and an opportunity. It's for guys in the NFL. Maybe it's something that they maybe don't have to think about for even 20 years because of the monetary compensation there, but in the CFL, you would be wise to be thinking pretty much your whole career about what you're going to do after. It doesn't mean you have to, be actively pursuing it while you're playing or even in the off seasons, but just to have an idea of what you, might even want to do after. That'll help a lot, because I know it is a tough transition, especially like you said, it's never on your own terms. It's rarely on your own terms. So you might be bitter towards that, and then it just kind of starts your career as a working professional off on a kind of a bad foot. So yeah, it's good to have an idea. I'm just kind of slowly starting to get into real estate, so I think that's what I'm going to do when I'm done playing football. Maybe make use of just my name out there, and especially in Calgary and whatnot, and hopefully that can be what I do after I'm done. But I obviously love the football. It's not something that you're too thrilled about to start your next career and whatnot. I also love the idea of coaching. I think seriously, Coach Harris has one of the best jobs in the world at the University of Calgary. Even like Matt and those guys, I think they seriously they have the dream job right there. Good gig, and they get to be around football for forever. So that won't be something that I'll count out either, for sure.
Yeah, and coaching football is I have a good working relationship with the defensive coordinator for the Bisons, Stan Pierre, and he's told me a lot about coaching is such a hard profession to consciously make a monetized career, because there's way less positions to be a head coach or to be paid to be a coach than there are to be paid players, because there's way less coaches than there are players on teams. So
100%, yeah.
if you get a
And
gig
yeah,
as a university coach or something, like, you got to hold on to that as long as you can, because that's not guaranteed for anybody, or not even for long.
yeah, 100%. And in Canada, it's all about spending your time as a volunteer coach, working your way up through the high school, whatnot, to get to that level. I know Coach Harris was a long time coach at the Churchill High School in Calgary, and he's been or Aberhart, sorry, but yeah, he's been continually doing that. And he just finally got a paid football gig after 20 plus years of just volunteering. So that's what it takes for some people. I mean, I think for myself, if I were to try to pursue it more after my CFL career, it might be a bit of a easier transition, just seeing as I played in the CFL, and if that's what college team would be looking for in a coach, then it'd be a perfect fit. But you'll have to wait and see, obviously.
Yeah, and I think that definitely, leveraging that network and that connection to a university program or having had CFL experience is a super important part of boosting your reputation right from the get-go, because you have a lot more, street cred to your name if you played in the CFL for X number of years compared to if you were just a high school player at the most, right? And
For sure, yeah.
but
But that doesn't always, it always doesn't translate into being a great coach. I mean, some of the greatest coaches, never really even played too much of the game themselves. They're just constantly like just students of statistics and students of just game film and whatnot. They love that kind of stuff. So, I just, there's so much stuff to learn from everyone, and I definitely wouldn't be able to, currently jump into something right now, but I'd love to take an off season to learn under some of these guys, and just see what get even more behind the scenes of what they do.
so my next question now is related to, speak of coaching. Really, really cool thing that I never knew until this CFL season is the position that Craig Dickinson used to play when he was a football player. And I was just absolutely blown away when I found out that he was a kicker when he played
Yeah.
college football. And I find that how is his dynamic with the team, considering that he's a pretty successful head coach so far in his career, but having played what, maybe you'd consider a position that's,
Right.
often most made fun of, or, people say
Yeah.
that they're the runt of the team or they're the weaklings or whatever. Like, how do you guys handle that? Like,
Yeah, well, I always got mad. I always got respect for the kickers, man. Especially, I'm a big soccer fan too, so I mean, I like that stuff. But yeah, honestly, Coach Dickey has been like in the CFL since like right when he finished up college. He started his coaching career basically. So he finished up at Montana, I believe he went to, and then Montana or Montana State. He'll be mad if I quote it wrong, but whatever. He yeah, and then he kind of started right away. He went did some GA like general assistant positions in the NFL. He was with the Chargers and the Raiders for a little bit in California, just for I want to say 5 years. I think he mentioned, and then yeah, he really just started just getting into the CFL. You know, just kind of starting off as little position coaches, and then he just became quite the special teams coordinator. I seriously think he was the most he seriously was the most respected one up until up until he became a head coach type of thing. And like at people talk now about Mark Killam at the you know and for the Stampeders, but he was he was under Coach Dickinson when he was with the Stampeders when he was under Jones as well. So I think really he's just a wealth of knowledge just in the game in general. And he did what he was good at. He was very good at special teams, so he still ran the special teams meeting and whatnot. But then he relied on his coordinators that he trusted to take a large role on the offensive defensive side. And yeah.
that's really cool, honestly. I mean, and obviously having played kicker, I always thought about, if you coach, like, how could a kicker ever be a head coach of a football team or someone that
Yeah.
played that position? But when you think about it from the perspective of who are the people that deal with basically every player in the team to be good candidates for head coaches, special teams coordinators, right?
100%. Yeah.
Or an offensive or defensive coordinator. Like Mike O'Shea coached the Bombers. What did he made his niche being a great special teams coordinator for the Argos when they won the Grey Cup.
That's what it seems like. Yeah, exactly. And it's such an important, like, there's never any, dogging on the guys that play special teams in the CFL, whereas in the NFL, the majority of the time it's a fair catch or a kick out the back of the end zone type of thing. So, people have a lot more respect for the special teamers in the CFL. And, I just think that, it's definitely 1/3 of the game in Canadian football. So it's very important, and people start to realize it the more they play up here.
Yeah, it is super important, and it is an equivalent 1/3 to offense and defense. It's not any more or any less. It is carries the same amount of weight. 1/3 is 1/3 is 1/3, and it is, I think, the biggest X factor phase in the Canadian football game for sure. Because if you have terrible special teams, you could be like the 2010 Chargers, have the best offense in the league, have the best defense in the league. You have the worst special teams, you're not making the playoffs, not even.
Something's gonna happen. You're gonna lose games that way.
Yeah, it's an awesome part of the game though, and I think that's what makes Canadian football really unique. So before we wrap up and get towards the end of our time here, Mike, I want to ask you one last question before we sign off today's episode. So the question I have for you is, who is in the CFL or has been your favorite player or position to match up against, whether it be at linebacker or whether it be at special teams? Is there a certain person that you've developed a battle with through a season, or is there a certain position that you really, really like being in to battle anybody who's in that position?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I have too many like individual battles with certain players, because seriously, it's just especially on special teams, it's just like a cycle. Like you might be blocking one guy one week, and then he might not even be on the roster the next week or whatnot like that. But there's seriously every team has a core group of 5 or 6 linebackers, DBs, running backs, defensive line, about 5 of the guys that, are Canadian and they play for special teams. And then, every team has a bunch of those. So you almost kind of know who those guys are, and you're going to be, up against those guys. And you always, talking smack with them during the plays and whatnot. But seriously, there's a camaraderie just between everyone after the games. Like one of my favorite players in the CFL is on the Bombers, Mike Miller, and I just have so much respect for the way he plays it, and always, if I get a chance after the game, I like to, dap him up and say what's up, and just stuff like that, and that's pretty much the gist of it. I'm not the biggest trash talker either. I'm not too quick with my words out there like some other guys. So, I wouldn't say I like to beef with too many people as it is.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not a Phillip Rivers yourself, more of an Andrew Luck, like a nice play kind of guy.
Of course, yeah, no. I won't be saying nice play or anything, but I just won't be talking too much out there. Yeah.
Well, Micah, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, man. Thanks so much for having been on today's episode. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was awesome, man. Thanks again.
Well, everyone, thank you again for listening to episode 20 with Saskatchewan Roughriders linebacker Micah Teitz on Huddle Up.